Welcome back to another episode of Question Period. We're calling this the bottom line on Question Period, which hopefully it is. Thanks for joining me today. We've been yesterday. We're at the trial of Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, and there's a little more unfolding today, but apparently much more tomorrow. I'm back there tomorrow for the trial, and we'll be speaking at an event that evening. Most of the tickets are gone, unfortunately, with Christine Anderson, the member of the European Parliament who has caused so much unnecessary controversy from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and a lot of others. But we'll just let the members make their statements for now, and I will be. Here we go.
Leader of the opposition.
Pretty good timing. Yeah.
After 8 years, this prime minister is not worth the cost, Mr. Speaker. He said that doubling the national debt would have no effect because interest rates were low. But those same deficits have fueled interest rate increases. And next year, we will spend $52 billion a year. That's $3,000 per capita in debt service. That's more than we'll be spending on health. Why is the prime minister spending more for bankers than for nurses? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since last week, more and more Canadians are having trouble believing the leader of the opposition. Let me bring back the true facts. Canada's debt is the lowest in the G7. We have the best debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and inflation keeps going down while maintaining services that Canadians rely on. The Conservative leader would cut childcare services to seniors, benefits, and care for children.
I don't believe Trudeau's there.
Will continue
the first time he's been there on
We're there for Canadians. We will continue to make responsible investments. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, that's false. Seniors are having to cut now, and other Canadians too, when it comes to groceries, for example. The director of Quebec Food Banks said that the situation is unprecedented and dramatic. 61% of food banks were running short of supplies. That's the poverty after 8 years of this government who's boosted food prices with his inflationist spending and his carbon tax. Will he reverse those policies so Canadians can afford to eat? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's getting a bit hard to believe what the opposition leader is saying, because instead of accelerating the enactment and the passage of Bill C-56, which would help Canadians with more competition in the grocery sector, he held up its passage. He found ways to slow that bill down, and that bill could help Canadians. We will continue to help Canadians out. We will invest in the economy, in supports for Canadians, while staying on a responsible financial course.
It's impossible to believe anything this prime minister says. First, when he gave $15 billion for one battery plant, he said there'd be no foreign workers. It was all a rumor. And then he said it would be one. And then his minister said there'd be a few. Now the company says it will be 900. This is $15 billion, $1,000 in cost for every single family. And now they're giving the money for 900 workers to do, foreign workers, to do a job that the Canadian Building Trades Union said could be done by our people at a cost of $300 million of lost wages for our union workers. Will the Prime Minister release the contract so we find out how many Canadian tax dollars are going to foreign replacement workers?
Can you believe the Liberals are blaming Stephen Harper for this one? You talk about
the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to have to correct the facts in this House of Commons, given what the Leader of the Opposition
we don't know what facts are, Justy boy.
2,300 local Canadian construction jobs and 2,500 permanent Canadian jobs when the Stellantis plant is completed.
That's right.
There'll be 3,000 jobs in the region when the Northvolt plant in Quebec is completed. You'd think the leader of the opposition would support those, but he doesn't. His uncontrollable urge to make everything a partisan issue means he's not supporting the investments that are going to help in Windsor, in St. Thomas, in Quebec, or elsewhere across the country. He wants cuts. We want investments in the future of Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This Prime Minister has forced 7 million Canadians to cut back on their diet to a point where they are no longer healthy. This Prime Minister has forced Canadians to cut their budget for food, and therefore a record-smashing 2 million people are lined up at a food bank every month around corners in ways that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. That's the austerity he's opposed on Canadians. Now he wants to quadruple the carbon tax on the farmers who bring us our food. We have a common sense conservative bill, C-234. Will the Prime Minister stop blocking this bill in the Senate, let it pass so that our farmers can produce food and our people can afford to eat it?
How long will it take Trudeau to get the climate change?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if the Leader of the Opposition actually cared about Canadians being able to afford their food, they wouldn't have dragged their heels on the passage of C-56 that is increasing competition in the grocery sector. But indeed, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of factors that deliver higher food prices, not just for Canadians, but people around the world. And one of the key ones is Russia's continued illegal invasion of Ukraine, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we can affirm clearly that we will stand with Ukraine with everything necessary.
Trudeau,
as long
it's
as
over.
necessary. As we
The
saw
war is
last
over,
week,
Trudeau.
no
You're a
conservative
bloody
politician
idiot.
can say the same in
How
this House.
stupid can you be? You're going to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes? It's
The
over.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Actually,
Oh, this
we are
man
the
is
only
so
party
stupid.
that has stood with Ukraine, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, you're a big deal. I don't give a crap if you stood with Ukraine. Because you're all going down together.
This Prime Minister, I understand what he's doing. He has imposed so much misery here at home, whether by doubling housing costs, forcing people into tent encampments, forcing 2 million people to go to
This
a
has nothing
food bank.
to do with
These
Ukraine.
are the problems here
That
at home
idiot
at the
Trudeau.
kitchen
Oh,
table.
he's
He
so
is so desperate to
dense.
talk about anything else that he avoids talking about what's happening in our own country. So will he answer the question?
No, he wants
Will
to give
take
billions to
his
Ukraine.
tax
That's all
off our
he's
farmers
concerned
so
about.
our people can afford to eat?
That idiot speaker keeps shutting us down up. I am
Right
so
Honourable
sick of
Prime
this
Minister.
Mr.
speaker.
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition full well knows that 97% of fuel emissions in the agricultural sector, in the farming sector, are already exempt from our price on pollution. But he is so desperate to try and score partisan points that he actually refused to stand in support of something Volodymyr Zelensky asked us for in this House. How is the Leader of the Opposition explaining to Ukrainian Canadians right across
Zelensky
the
is a
country
clown
that he no longer
and a
stands with
corrupt
Ukraine on
and a
things
thief
that they need
and
right
a tyrant,
now to win this war?
just like you, Trudeau. Zelensky is a crook and a tyrant like you, Trudeau. And that's why you appeal to him. And he's going down. He will be president
Alors, s'il vous plaît.
not much
Order,
longer.
please.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, in recent days, we've heard gunshots in Montreal. Glass has been shattered. There's been graffiti, and it's all been directed at the Jewish community. We fear that
Is
these
it time for more gun control?
acts were in some way encouraged by an exception that allows hate speech and incitations to violence under the criminal code. In light of recent events, will the Prime Minister agree to do away with the religious exception under the criminal code?
Oh, get off it, you
Honourable Prime
moron.
Minister,
Yeah, we need more
I fully
hate
agree
speech
with my
laws, like
honourable
a hole in the
colleague
head.
that the increase in Islamophobia and anti-Semitism is rising in Canada. There's been more hatred. It's unacceptable. I condemn the attack against the CCJ. We condemn all violence. We will look at the bill put forward by my honorable colleague to see whether indeed that could help fight hate and incitements to violence. It's a complex issue, but we will work constructively to protect Canadians.
Then I have
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. I'm cautiously optimistic about that. I hope we'll get somewhere on this, but the bill is very brief. It's just
So this
about
blockhead now wants more
repealing
hate speech
two
laws.
sections in the criminal
What a
code
dork.
that create exceptions. They're used
Why is the
to
bloc even
justify,
making amendments
allow,
to
and
Canada's criminal
perpetuate
code
hate
when you're
speech.
bloody separatists?
Will the
Get
Prime
off the
Minister
stage.
agree to move
You're a
forward
joke.
swiftly in passing this necessary and straightforward bill?
le 13
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, all forms of hatred have no place in Canada and should be condemned. The main thing is to unite Canadians and Quebecers, and hate speech is not allowed under the criminal code. Calls for genocide, public incitement to hatred are already forbidden. We will take a close look at the proposed legislation put forward by the Bloc leader, and we will be there to work together to protect Canadians while respecting the free society we live in.
honorable député
The honourable member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, thanks to the hard work of the Quebec and Canadian labour movements and the insistence of the NDP, we will have anti-scab legislation in this country. The law will make it possible to negotiate better working conditions and wages for workers. But we had to force the Liberals to do it. And the Conservatives, rather, who claim to be on the workers' side, refuse to say whether they will vote for this bill, which would help increase families' purchasing power. Mr. Speaker, the anti-scab law must be passed and enter into force quickly. Will the Liberals do it, or will they drag their feet some more? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I understand that the NDP likes to say that they're the party of the workers, but since 2015, we've been there to demonstrate that we are with
Not if they drive trucks, you
repealing
halfwit.
anti-union legislation that came into force under the Harper government. We've been there to show that we're willing to work hand in hand with unions.
What a
We've done that
moron
since
this man is.
2015, and we will keep doing so. We're very pleased with this legislation that prohibits replacement workers. We're glad that the NDP worked together with us, and we hope the Conservatives will understand that in order to build a stronger middle class, it requires strong unions. So we need to support unions too.
from Hamilton Centre.
For decades, New Democrats, the Canadian Labour Congress, have fought Liberals and Conservatives for anti-scab legislation. And this session, the NDP used our power to force the Liberals to
Where do they find these bloody
respect
communists
collective
today?
bargaining rights. And while the Conservative leader pretends to have the backs of workers, when push comes to shove, he's nowhere to be found to stand up for them. CLC leaders are here on the Hill today demanding that the anti-scab legislation be implemented sooner than the 18-month Liberal timeline. So, will the
Just
Prime
too
Minister
many
commit
bloody
to the necessary
communists
changes
in the
to truly
NDP.
support workers and implement the anti-scab C-58 as quickly as possible?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know to which extent strong unions and collective bargaining are essential to the prosperity of the middle class in this country. That's why from 2015 onwards, this government has been a friend to organized labor, has worked with them to overturn the anti-union legislation that the Stephen Harper government brought in, including with the leader of the opposition as a minister in that government. We've continued to stand with workers. We're very pleased that the NDP is supporting our replacement workers bill. We really hope that the Conservatives
Trudeau
will
hasn't been on his
understand
feet
that
this
supporting
long since he was
workers
at the
means
bar.
supporting unions. We hope the Conservatives will stand up and support our anti-scab legislation.
Yeah, I'm so sick of hearing about Ukraine and the billions we already have a free trade agreement with Ukraine. It's called free money.
Plans to quadruple on Canadian farmers. One farm alone in my riding is spending $150,000 a year on carbon taxes. And the Prime Minister wants to quadruple that number up to $600,000. That might put the farm out of business, which would mean we'd have to buy more foreign, expensive food from more polluting countries. The Prime Minister is blocking a common sense conservative bill C-234 in the Senate that would take the tax off our farmers. Will he commit here and now to another carbon tax flip-flop to carve it out?
He's going to
for
say
our farmers
97% is already exempt from our tax on pollution. What a fantasy land this Trudeau lives in. Oh, here's this piece of baggage.
House that's flip-flopping, and it's the Conservatives with regards to their support for Ukraine. That's Mr.
Right.
Speaker, the Ukrainian
What the hell does Ukraine have to do with the carbon tax on farmers?
Voting against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. In fact,
What
they're
a-
calling on the Conservatives to change their position.
What an
to vote for the
excuse
bill
for a
and to
politician.
support Ukraine.
Yes.
She
Mr. Speaker,
even for
it's hard to
politicians,
trust what the leader of the opposition says because
she
he keeps
can't
changing
pass
his
muster.
position. He says he supports Ukraine, but he didn't in his actions. He could demonstrate, direct his caucus to support this legislation and to support Ukraine.
Yeah, like Ukraine really needs a free trade deal right now when it's on the verge of collapse.
That they put before the House, and we're against quadrupling the carbon tax on Canadian farmers. The Prime Minister can neither defend his position, nor does he have the courage to just admit, as he did on home heating oil, that he was wrong. He plans to quadruple the tax on our farmers who feed our people, which will send millions more people to the food bank. So will he rise today and show the courage to admit he was wrong and back Conservative Bill C-234 to take the tax off our farmers so that our people can afford to eat? Get up and answer.
Is he going to get up? No, he's going to give it to this reprehensible woman who wants to cancel history. A friend of Nazis everywhere.
Courage to admit he was wrong. In fact, on Thursday, when he was called out by the media for alleging falsely that there was a terrorist attack, instead of taking ownership like any Canadian would be expected to do, he blamed the media and he doubled down. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition has a real challenge with taking responsibility for his actions and his decisions. And quite frankly, Canadians deserve better, and they deserve to know the truth behind his decisions and his actions. Thank you.
Yeah.
The honourable member from Foothills.
Farmers from across Canada are calling on Liberal-appointed senators to support a common-sense Conservative Bill 234, which would lower costs on farming.
Keep it up.
And
Keep
making
pushing,
food more
because
affordable. But the Liberals'
hate farmers.
Environment
The
Minister has
Liberals
threatened to
hate
resign
farmers.
if there's any carbon tax carve-outs. That's amazing when you have a record-shattering 2 million Canadians relying on food banks. The Environment Minister's dedication to making life unaffordable is unwavering. But will his Prime Minister ask that his Environment Minister stop threatening so-called independent senators and allow the passage of 234 so Canadians can afford to feed themselves?
The Honourable Minister for Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I would like to read you an extract
Oh, the
from
Gilbo
news
is up.
article. Canadian senator flees
The
home
tyrant.
amid safety concerns
The mini
following
tyrant.
wanted poster incident. In a disturbing
The
turn of
Green
events,
Peace
Canadian Senator Bernadette Clement was
The Green
reportedly
Peace Geek.
forced to leave her home due to fears for her safety. The incident came after a provocative post taken to a wanted poster was shared online by the Conservative Party of Canada, Mr. Speaker. So who's bullying who in this House and in the Senate? Certainly not us.
What's
We're
this
not telling
moron's
senators
point?
how to vote. The Conservative Party is.
You're the one interfering with the senator. This guy is just a poor excuse
Here's
for a
the
cabinet
facts
minister.
that the Environment Minister refuses to recognize. An Alberta poultry farm paid $180,000 a year in carbon taxes just to heat and cool their barn. When the Prime Minister quadruples his carbon tax, they'll be paying $480,000 a year. That farmer said he can't afford those tax hikes. His options are to pass on those costs to consumers or just call it quits. Is that what this Environment Minister
He wants them to call
Is
it quits because he
bankrupt
wants Canadians
farmers
to
and force
starve.
Canadians to
That's
food banks
Gilbo's
just to save
plan,
his job?
is to shut off the electricity, turn off the power, and have
Honourable
Canadians
Minister
starve.
for the Environment and Climate Change.
And climate change, yeah.
Independent senators said about what the Conservative Party is doing in the House and in the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Senator Saint-Germain said pled violently through his earpiece.
Said it's a
as
joke
before
now.
Senate Clement as we sat at our desk. yelling and berating us for proposing this routine motion. She said the Conservative senator pointed fingers at another ISG members and suggested he would
Talk
blow
about
up
projecting his own
on the
idiocy.
Senate's Human Resource Committee. And no matter how much the Conservative Party would like us to believe that this is about taxation, it is not. It's about bullying, Mr. Speaker. That's what it is.
You're the one bullying. Although I wouldn't be at least been intimidated if a half-witted jerk like you came to my office.
Once again, I'd like to call on all members to please refrain from speaking
And
when it's
this
not your
half-wit
turn.
keeps turning off the sound when he doesn't like
That
anything that's
way,
going on.
all members.
Boy, they're going to
can hear
rue the day
question
when they
and the
elected
answer.
this
The
half-wit
honourable member for
as the
Louis
speaker.
Saint-Laurent. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal government
Greg Fergus. He's already in a
is
conflict of
costing
interest problem.
Canadians more and more.
Corrupt.
The Liberal carbon tax on farmers is driving up the price of food. And I would remind you that people are already struggling when it comes to grocery costs. The Conservatives are proposing a common sense measure, which is to scrap the Liberal carbon tax on food production. That's Bill C-234, which is in the Senate. Everybody is with us on this.
I can't stand the Liberals,
sore losers
libtard
that don't
speaking
agree
either, but thanks
with
for
us on
mentioning it.
this. Why don't they tell their unelected senators not to be holding up this bill? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting to see the Conservatives' double standard on this Senate because they've used it to block legislation
This guy
they
is a
don't
Marxist.
like. They don't hesitate
He's a
to do
patsy
that.
for the Chinese
I'd
communists.
also like to point out that in a recent
He should have a bag over his
article,
head every time he goes in the House of
independent
Commons.
senators were bullied by a Conservative senator
Oh, we're losing
at the request of the
viewership right now.
Conservative
Wonder
Party
why.
of Canada. That's not the way things work
Very
in this
interesting.
place. We don't tell the senators what to do. That's not how it works, unlike the Conservative Party of Canada.
You are telling the senators what to do. That's exactly what
The
you're
honourable member
doing.
for Louis Saint-Laurent.
Boy,
Mr.
you must
Speaker,
think
the
people-
fact in my riding is, and I'm sure it's the same in Montreal, the fact is that food banks are overrun, not with food, but with people coming
Yes, it's just
to
like the
use
Great
the food
Depression.
bank.
And yet,
People
we've
who
got the
used to
lowest
contribute
inflation
to
in the
food banks are
G7.
now relying on them. Over 2 million Canadians are using
We know
food
it's
banks.
garbage. We know it's all.
And
We
our
all know it's
proposal
garbage.
is
don't
to
we?
help farmers, to help bring the price of food down. But the Liberal government wants senators to defy the will of the elected House. Is that what you call democracy?
And Trudeau's banning,
Minister of the
effectively banning
Environment and Climate
fertilizer as well.
Change. I find this a bit strange,
Because of this
Mr.
half-wit
Speaker, that the
who thinks he's
Conservative
gonna-
Party
More
never
greenhouse gases.
mentions the $1.7 billion in support for farmers that we give them all across the
support
country.
is that?
It's also interesting that they never talk about the impact of climate change, which costs
There is
farmers
none
hundreds of millions
on
of dollars,
floods or
and that
forest
number is
fires.
constantly rising.
You are making it
And
up.
speaking of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, media reports show that a Conservative
Well, media
senator,
reports.
at the request of the Conservative Party, has been bullying other senators. And this was orchestrated. This campaign of violence was orchestrated by the party,
gall
Mr. Speaker.
to project his own inadequacies and his own interference on everybody
I'd
else.
like to remind all
Oh,
members,
shut up, you half-witted
even in
speaker.
our
This guy is
comments,
just
even if
so,
you don't
he's
have the
dumber than a
floor,
bag of
it's
hammers,
still
this
important
guy.
to use parliamentary language. And people should not
And
be
yesterday,
accused of lying
he shut off the
deliberately,
sound
even by
yesterday
hecklers.
when they were
The honourable member for
the liberals
Belleuil
themselves
Chambly.
were shouting
Mr.
down
Speaker,
their
in
own
recent days,
their
we've
own
seen the
agriculture
Minister of
minister.
Immigration
They didn't want him
say some
talking because
disrespectful things.
poor old Macaulay
Disrespectful
hasn't quite
towards
got it
a bloc
anymore.
member who was simply asking
So
a
the liberals
question and
were shouting
merely
at their
doing his
own ag
job.
minister to sit down.
But let's
Here, I'm going to
just
shut him up for a second.
move on.
I'm sick of the blockheads today asking for more hate speech laws
minister
because
should
it's all amounts to
recognize-
censorship. Yeah, I wasn't watching yesterday, but apparently the Conservatives were asking the Liberals about Bill C-234, and why isn't the Agriculture Minister supporting it? He was a farmer, sort of, himself, and Macaulay got up to talk, and he was shouted down by his own caucus. And the speaker shut off his mic because the Liberals didn't want Macaulay talking because they're worried he's not quite with it anymore. And if you listen to Macaulay, Yeah, he looks like he's reading a script provided by Stephen Guilbeault. It's all about, we all know that climate change is behind the forest fires and the floods and costing farmers money. That's the only line he seems to know anymore. So they wouldn't let him even talk yesterday, and they shouted him down. They're his own caucus members. And the speaker, this idiot speaker who loves to turn the volume down or off when he doesn't like what's being said, he shut his microphone off yesterday. He shut Macaulay's microphone off. It's just amazing what we are experiencing in the latter days, if you will, the last days of the Canadian Parliament, because I'm not sure we're going to survive much longer with Trudeau there. I keep saying, you think we're going to have an election in 2 years? Yeah, we're supposed to. Just under 2 years now, right? September? But I bet you Justin Trudeau is going to find a way to postpone that election. He's got 2 years, just a little under 2 years, to find any catastrophe, any device to have another great reset, just like he did during the pandemic. He used COVID to batten down the hatches, to get authoritarian, to lock the country down, to destroy businesses, to get as tough as that little imbecile can get. And he's going to do it again, but he's using the war. Right? He used the war in Ukraine to give billions of dollars away. He's given away every last Leopard tank we have, and they've been destroyed on the battlefield. I mean, this should make you furious. 11,000 assault rifles to Ukraine? Somebody asked me the other day, are those the ones they confiscated from Canadians with the gun law? Well, no, they've stolen those from the military. Giving them to Ukraine, which is on the verge of falling. The Ukrainian government will fall within the next 4 weeks, or it will sue for peace and it's going to lose a lot of land in the Donbass area. That's the facts of life. Those are the facts of life. Trudeau doesn't want to face those facts of life. And frankly, nobody in this abysmal House of Commons wants to face those facts of life. They want to pretend that Ukraine's going to win this war. It never had a hope in hell of winning this war. But we have sunk billions of dollars into it because the armaments manufacturers, which donate a lot of money to Trudeau, because they keep him in power too, they love this war. They love the war in Ukraine. They love the war in the Mideast. They want people to keep fighting and killing each other because they get rich in the process. And for these people to stand up, we're standing with Ukraine. However, Ukraine is finished. And Zelensky's a criminal. He's a crook. He just bought $50 million with 2 yachts. More about that later.
Taxation and spending are the exclusive right of this House, not the Senate. In our system, there is no taxation without representation. Section 53 of the Constitution says all financial legislation must originate in this House. Standing Order 80 says that this House alone grants aids and supplies. When will the Prime Minister direct his representative in the Senate to respect this democratic institution, the only democratic institution in this country, and pass the tax bill?
Yeah, see how that idiot speaker shuts the sound off? This is really annoying. He's really annoying.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As annoying as Karina Gould
The
is.
other side of the House is almost too thick to handle today. When
You were
hear,
too thick to
members
handle
often
because you're
talking
very
about
thick
respecting
between your ears.
democracy or democratic institutions,
You're the
there's a
one
pattern of
who had a
behavior
Nazi.
here that I thought was,
You met with him.
maybe just with the leader of the
You
opposition.
loved
I didn't
it.
expect it from the member for Wellington Hall.
We have pictures of you meeting with the Nazi before you invited him to Parliament.
The Senate is independent. Unfortunately,
And you have the nerve to call the Conservatives extremists when you're the one who invites Nazis to the House of Commons. You are despicable. You're disgraceful.
From Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, we used to live in a country where the governor regularly ignored bills passed by the elected legislative assembly. We used to live in a country where the appointed upper chamber used to regularly ignore bills passed by the elected lower chamber. That was a country long, long ago whose institutions were abolished after the rebellions of 1837. But now the unelected Senate thinks it's some sort of Chateau, clique, or Tory compact, ignoring a tax bill passed by this elected House. Again, when will the Prime Minister direct his representative in the Senate to respect the right and will of this House and pass the tax bill?
Nobody knows who's playing in the Senate anymore. Michael Chung. Nobody knows who's on whose side anymore. except they all seem to be voting with Trudeau.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of respecting the will of this House, perhaps the leader of the Conservative Party would like to talk to the Conservative senators that sit in his caucus and ask them to pass the bail reform bill that was passed by this House of Commons.
Dominique Legault. All right, Susan Hamilton, I stand corrected. It was 75 million for those 2 yachts that Zelensky bought, and not 50. I don't know if you're watching, if you heard that on Redacted yesterday, I did too. Watch Redacted tonight. I'm on there talking about Trudeau and Ukraine and this whole quagmire that we are very soon going to see
with the holidays approaching
end.
After 8 years, we can see that this prime minister is in panic mode. He's desperate. Bill C-234 would exempt farmers. It's blocked, the GST for farmers, and it's blocked in the Senate. And he's asking unelected senators to kill this bill, even though it was passed by elected officials here in the House of Commons. Why is he using unelected senators to run counter to the Constitution and undermine
he's running interference
Canadian
with the
families?
Senate.
The Honourable Minister.
Right now, he's going to have to resign because he promised he would.
Talking about respect for democracy in the House of Commons. The Conservative senators, who are also unelected, are
another rough night, Dominic?
An important bill on gun control, and it was passed here in the House. So if our friends opposite, Mr. Speaker, want to do something for democracy, they should ask Conservative senators who sit in their caucus to pass Bill C-21, which was passed by the House of Commons to protect Canadians against illegal guns in Canada.
Gail Littleton, thank you for your comment. I'm glad you're enjoying this.
The honourable member from Égalité.
I used to do the same thing with a group of people.
Is very clear.
But it's more fun to do it when hundreds of people are listening.
Of the 1867 Constitution
Thanks
Act
for watching, Gail.
States that all money bills must come from the House of Commons. And the House regulations are also very clear. These money bills cannot be amended by the Senate. These maneuvers to bully senators goes against the Constitution, it goes against House rules, and it goes against democracy. Will the Liberals stop with this unconstitutional filibustering of Bill C-234?
It's a big game. They are filibustering this bill in the Senate.
Their families at Christmas. The Honourable Minister.
Dominic Legault.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Conservatives like to pretend in this House, like to claim that they're trying to protect Canadians, for example, from firearms violence.
What?
We're ensuring
we're going to bring up firearms violence after a question
safe.
About an agriculture bill.
Conservative premiers, such as Premier Ford, have asked for
How
this.
stupid does Dominic Legault think Canadians are? Pretty stupid. He thinks they're pretty stupid.
Conservative senator friends tomorrow at their caucus meeting. That would be a great idea.
The honourable member from Vancouver
I am so
East.
sick of these Liberals.
People with full-time jobs are sleeping in their cars.
Yeah.
And
No, I got to tell you something. Jenny Kwan really doesn't do much here. I was at the Senate last week for protest. And I tell you, I couldn't believe what has happened to the Senate because, I focus mostly on the House of Commons. I haven't been in the Senate in years. But they've got like 5 different parties there now. And it's absolute chaos. And they've got some guy there representing the government. But the whole thing is a big farce because all of these senators who claim to be independent and claim to have their own little party going are all secretly, well, not so secretly, aligned with Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. So it's really, it was eye-opening. But the Liberals will do anything to not pass this bill that's going to exempt farmers from the carbon tax. But they want to do it in a way that looks like somebody else is to blame. Must have been those independent senators who did this, even though they didn't vote for it in the House. People forget. Memory is short. And they don't want farmers to have a break because, yes, the Liberals do want a food shortage because it's going to be a crisis that they can exploit. Justin Trudeau wants you to be hungry because he can exploit that situation. He can restore order the way he wants to restore order. And if you think I'm kidding, look at his track record. That's what he did during the pandemic. He takes his orders from the World Economic Foundation. Clearly, he's a acolyte of that organization. He goes there and is feted and is honored and is praised. That's his second home. That's where he's getting his orders from the globalists. And we all know that. And that's why he doesn't give a damn about what happens to Canadians, because he's part of a global elite that always will survive despite what they're doing to nation states and what Trudeau is doing to Canada.
Currently going through, Mr. Speaker. We recently passed Bill S-12 in this House, which addresses some of these concerns about online safety. The protection of children in our society is of utmost importance, and I have a commitment from this side of the House and from all sides of the House that we will do everything we can to make sure that they are protected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, every day people across the country lose loved ones to overdoses.
I want to respond to something here from Karina Mitchell. Did I see the comment from the MP that blames Pierre for the shooting in Manitoba, saying it's because of his MAGA movement? Yeah, I mean, Trudeau's been using the MAGA movement boogeyman, like whatever that means. Like Donald Trump is up here in Canada giving Pierre Poilievre talking points and policy statements. I mean, this is such nonsense. I mean, personally, I'm all for MAGA and Donald Trump, but I think we're capable of making our own common sense policy in this country without it being given to us by anybody else. But as soon as the Liberals get worried, they start using phrases like U.S. style, like everything the U.S. does is evil. And they start talking about MAGA, oh, and Donald Trump, oh my. And that's supposed to get us all very, very worried that somehow we're being taken over by these right-wing extremists. But who are the right-wing extremists? Well, Voff, an SS veteran who comes to the House of Commons and gets 2 standing ovations. Maybe that's a right-wing extremist. And those are the ones the Liberals support. Those are the ones that the Ukrainian government supports. They've got a whole neo-Nazi battalion running around Ukraine right now called the Azov Battalion. Those are the extremists. So I am just sick of the hypocrisy of it all.
Corn and converting it to a variety of alcohols, from pharmaceuticals to biofuels. They buy corn from Canadian farmers and from nearby American farmers who do not pay the carbon tax on fertilizer, the delivery of seed, and the delivery and drying of their corn. Can the Prime Minister explain what happens to Canadian farmers' bottom line when they pay the carbon tax and have to compete with American farmers that don't in their own backyard? Why is he interfering with the so-called independent senators blocking C-234?
Yeah, so-called independent senators. I mean, it's a big part. Oh, they're going to let the guy talk today.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague is well aware farmers and ranchers are on the front lines of climate change. They expect parties to have a plan to deal with climate change. We have a plan. My honourable colleague's party does not. For an example, 2 weeks ago, I was in Winnipeg and announced a $9.2 million for Living Labs. In fact, Living Labs, Mr. Speaker, is to make sure that farmers, ranchers, scientists, and the industry itself work together to make sure that farmers and ranchers stay on the cutting line. We have and will continue to support our farmers.
Can this senile old man answer a question about agriculture and not about climate change?
We know why the Prime Minister is blocking the carbon tax carve-out for Canadian farmers. It's because his Environment Minister has threatened to quit if Bill C-234 passes.
Yes,
but
quit. Just quit. Go ahead. Do it. Make our day.
He's jetting off to Dubai for 2 weeks. It's the middle of the day in Ottawa, but it's the middle of the night in Dubai. So will the Prime Minister at least allow senators to pass a carbon tax carve-out while his minister is asleep in Dubai?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, and yes, I will be proudly representing Canada
Chinese
at COP28 in Dubai, and I will be in good
You go to
company,
China to
Mr.
suck up to your
Speaker.
Chinese
The
communist
Premier of
buddies.
Alberta will be there. Premier Smith is leaving tomorrow for COP28 with the largest provincial delegation we have ever seen in the history of COPs, Mr. Speaker. We will have the Premier of Saskatchewan, who will be there as well. Scott Moe, with the largest Saskatchewan delegation we've ever seen.
They're there to
Quebec will be
protect
there with
themselves,
more
you
than
halfwit,
120 representatives from
not to
civil
advance your
society,
climate change
business,
agenda.
and trade union, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be proud to represent Canada at COP28.
COP28 is a complete and utter waste of time in there. And that's jet setting. Oh, we got to jet set to COP28 to talk about climate change. We have to talk about the existential threat. We have to talk about the crisis. We have to talk about the impending doom.
From Lakeland.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll all look forward to see what those high carbon hypocrites come up with. But Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, it's clear this Prime Minister
Good
isn't
for you,
worth the
Shannon.
cost. The
Hi.
Hunger report said food bank usage has gone up for 7 years in a row. The NDP Liberals' carbon taxes hike food prices and force Canadians to skip meals or cut the basics. Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax for all for good, but a quick fix is Conservative Bill C-234 that will cut it from farm fuels. So, will the Prime Minister stop interfering with his senators and let them pass it so farmers can afford to feed Canadians and so Canadians can afford to eat?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the MP for Lakeland has the privilege of representing the amazing town of Vegreville.
Oh, here she goes.
That town is a source of
She's just
for
warming
all
up, folks.
Ukrainian Canadians, especially
Haven't
from
you
the
missed
prairies.
Christy in the house?
The amazing Kisimka that
Just
the
lecturing
people
you like
there
this?
put up. Pride
Oh,
in their heritage.
Christy.
Is she ashamed that her party has voted against Ukraine? I hope she
Oh,
is, because she
no.
should be.
Voted against Ukraine. Yes, I know you love the Ukrainian Nazis so much. Your grandfather was one.
Voice does carry, and it is very unique.
Christy
So I will
loves
ask
those
all
Ukrainian
members
Nazis. Shut
to
up,
please-
Speaker. You're a bloody idiot. Christy Freeland loves Ukrainian Nazis. She loves to go and party with them. She loves to wear their colors. She loves it because her grandfather was a Nazi propagandist.
Friends and relatives support that position. I'll never stop fighting for them. But that right there is the Liberals' distract and divide agenda. And it's only these guys who don't get that when you tax the farmers that grow the food, the truckers that ship the food, the store that sells the food, and the consumer that buys the food, Canadians can't afford the food. Yet this PM's going to quadruple his carbon tax, even though he already forces the people to choose between heating and eating. Now, he can help bring down those costs right now. So when will the PM get out of his former
Talk about a
Liberal
rapid
candidate
fire
MP
delivery.
senators and get them to pass the common sense?
She's getting it all in, I'll say that. Give him hell, Shannon.
Finance and Deputy Prime Minister.
I am actually extremely.
I think I'll talk
that
about Ukraine again
Canadians
because I don't want to
across
talk
our
about the other
amazing
one.
country are in favor of our free trade
And
deal.
we know how stupid you all are because I'm so smart.
Because the Ukrainian Canadian Congress said so. And I'm confident because President Zelensky
Yes, and they love your
wants that
grandfather
deal.
too.
And you know what? It's a great way to bring down the prices of food and fuel for the whole world by stopping Vladimir Putin. I just don't understand why these conservatives are standing against Ukraine. They're here.
Because it's a losing cause and we can't afford to give them any more
The
billions.
honourable member for
Christia,
Santia
think about
Mr.
it.
Speaker, today, unions representing tens of thousands of aerospace workers in Quebec
Oh, here they
are
go.
here on the
Here they
Hill,
go.
and we're
Here
very
they
happy to see them here.
go.
They're here to
This
say
is
that
their-
Ottawa should not be giving more than $8 billion of our money
They
without a
think
bid
any
for tender
aerospace industry in
to
Quebec
Boeing to
is
replace
owned
the
by
Aurora
Quebec.
aircraft. It's a farce, and that's not my opinion. It's what Michael Hood, the former commander of the Air Force, said. Mr. Speaker, workers are demanding that Quebec expertise can compete in this process. Will Ottawa finally announce a competitive bid for tender? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank our colleague for underscoring our expertise, the expertise of our aerospace workers in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada. That is why this decision, which
Nancy
will be made
Goodchild,
shortly,
thank
which
you
is an
very much
important
for your
one to
comment.
secure our
Great
defense
commentary.
and our military
I hope
sector,
it achieves something anyway.
and also to support
It's
the
better than
aerospace
just
industry
listening
in
to these
Canada.
halfwits.
We know this represents 220,000 jobs.
You can turn
And he
CPAC on
contributes
and watch
$20
these
billion to our
half-wits with no
GDP.
commentary. I think it's more fun with some commentary. I really do.
The honorable member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, it's almost the holidays, but the federal has no right to gift $8 billion to Boeing without a call for tender. Everyone's asking for this process. Aerospace workers, the Quebec industry, the premiers of Quebec and Ontario,
People
members
ask
of
me,
all
why do you
parties in
bother
this
doing
House
why do
at
you
the
listen
Defense
to
Committee have
question
been
period?
asking for
Because
this.
it's just so
Everyone
infuriating.
understands that we...
Yeah, okay, we'll shut the blockhead up for a second. Yes, it is infuriating, but we have to keep fighting. We have to keep fighting back the crap that we're getting from Justin Trudeau and this pernicious, corrupt Liberal government. It is just so vacant of any principle. It is so lacking any moral objective that we have to oppose it in every way, in any way we can. And if I have to go on the air 3 or 4 times a week to watch question period and to point out how imbecilic these ministers are and how moronic their arguments are, I think I have to do that. And thanks for joining me. I know it's painful. I know it's painful.
While jacking up taxes and driving
AAA
more
credit
Canadians
rating.
into poverty. 71% of food bank users say their circumstances.
Oh, what's wrong with the speaker now? Somebody speak out of turn, speaker.
The honourable member from York Simcoe, I had difficulty hearing his question. Can you please start his question from the top?
Yes, Karina. Karina Mitchell. I can't wait till the Liberals have no party status or end up in the fourth party.
Much worse after 8
It could
years
happen.
of this NDP
It could happen.
Liberal
They
government.
do deserve
If this
it
Prime Minister spoke to real Canadians
because of their
lined
arrogance
up at food banks,
and
he'd
detachment.
know you can't feed a family with AAA credit rating. So will this Prime Minister stop
that's good.
blocking common sense conservative bill 2, 3, 4 so
Yes.
Canadian families can feed themselves?
You can't feed a family on a AAA credit rating. That is good because that's the bullshit you're hearing from the Liberals every other question.
Continue
AAA
to
credit rating is
invest
the
in
best in the
social
G7.
security programs like the Old Age Security, Canada Pension Plan, and in families through the
I'll have a
Canada
Scotch and
Child
soda,
Benefit
Janice.
and the $10 a day childcare program, programs which the Conservatives continue to vote against, Mr. Speaker, totally lacking empathy or understanding of the struggle of Canadians. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to govern with the needs of Canadians at the heart of everything we do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister's soft on crime policies, crime, chaos, and disorder have become the norm in Canada. Just this last week, we have seen armed robberies, shootings of businesses, armed carjackings, extortion letters sent to business owners, and international gangsters directing shootings at families here in Canada. Mr. Speaker, when will this Prime Minister finally take the safety of Canadians seriously?
Yeah, I was just asked. Sorry, let me get back to
The
you.
honourable minister.
I was just asked who runs the Bank of Canada. The governor of the Bank of Canada is Tiff Macklem. He's the guy who keeps pushing the interest rates.
Funny, Mr.
That was a
Speaker, but
question
good news.
from.
Tomorrow morning they
and
have
it's
a
Mr.
caucus
Creighton.
meeting
I'm just
where conservative
I'm just
senators will be present. And they should perhaps
But
talk
for
to
the,
their conservative Senate parliamentary colleagues
Paul
to
Duffy,
ask them
yes,
to please
it's
pass
Tiff
the legislation that this House adopted to
Macklem.
strengthen bail conditions for serious violent
I guess he was
offenders,
raised
something
in
that our
a
government worked
combative
on with
family with a
premiers
name like
across
that.
the country, including conservative premiers. And also, Mr. Speaker, there's important gun control legislation stuck in the Senate because conservatives won't.
What does this guy almost look like? He just crawled out of bed before 5 minutes before question period. Must be all the stress of his job. Man.
The honourable
Must be the
member
stress.
from Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, that's another bill blocked by more Liberal senators, and it was actually this Liberal government's soft on crime policies like C5 and C75
I'd like to
that
see
let
him really have
serious
some
violent
stress, though, in
criminals
the
back
unemployment
onto
line.
our streets, and incidents of violent crimes have skyrocketed in incident. Violent crime is up by 39%. Murders are up 43%. Gang-related homicides and violent gun crimes are up over 100%, Mr. Speaker. Only conservatives will end Liberal NDP soft on crime policies that keep violent offenders on the streets. Mr. Speaker, when will they get out of the way and allow common sense conservatives to bring home safer streets?
Justin doesn't want safer streets.
Speaker, again, my honorable friends
And Dominic Legault doesn't want safe streets either.
It's the conservative senators,
They can't
Mr.
exploit
Speaker,
safe streets.
who are blocking legislation
Absolutely.
requested by conservative premiers and worked on by this government last spring and adopted by this House of Commons at all stages when we came back in September. So, Mr. Speaker, why isn't that legislation to strengthen bail reform and to keep Canadians safer? Why isn't that legislation adopted now? Because senators from the Conservative Party are blocking it, Mr. Speaker.
Shame.
That might be something they'd like to do before Christmas.
Karina, Gould, sit down.
The honourable member from
You just,
Halifax
you
West.
take a-
Mr. Speaker, our government is continuing to
Oh,
support Canadians.
here we go with the softball. It's that time
As
of
inflation
day.
continues and
When
some
it hits
prices
50 minutes
remain too
inside
high.
a question period, the
Yesterday,
softballs
the
start
Minister
coming.
of the Environment and Climate Change
Oh, can the Minister of Environment and
spoke
Climate
about
Change
new
tell the House
measures
how
in the
wonderful he
fall
is
economic
and what a
update
great job
to
he's
enable
doing
more
fighting
Canadians to
climate
be able
change?
to pay for their housing while also helping them to reduce their home energy bills.
Oh, yeah.
Can
The
the
heat
Minister
pump
tell
will
the
do that.
House about these important measures?
Oh, please tell the House about them. I gotta tell you about the heat
The
pump
Honourable
salesman.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you
I'd
very
like
much
to
for
thank my
that question.
colleague for the question. Our government is addressing problems of affordability and environmental problems at the same time. We are increasing the number of affordable housing units in Canada and making it easier to save thousands of dollars every year on energy bills. We are helping Canadians obtain heat pumps thanks to an investment of $500 million over 4 years. On this side of the House, we are getting results for Canadians, both on
Okay.
affordability and the environment.
Shut up for a second. You see the Justin's heat pump commercial? Have a look at my Stand on Guard episodes. It's a couple of episodes back, but Justin did a heat pump sales job on his YouTube station. It got like 400 or 500 views. And he's telling everybody how these are the answer. Oh, get your heat pump. Please buy your heat pump. Buy one from me. And he's not, of course, telling you that they don't work in temperatures below minus 15 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, there's no hot air out there to suck into the house. And they just don't work at all. So, yeah, you get your heat pump and you're going to freeze, buddy. You're going to freeze this winter with your Trudeau heat pump. So, and it's outrageous to me. I mean, would you buy a new or used heat pump from Justin Trudeau? But there he is on his own little YouTube station, which has got, I think, maybe 4,000 subscribers over the last 8 months. That's the Prime Minister of Canada. You know, usually in the President of the United States has like 20 million followers on there. But no, he has got like 4,000 subscribers on his YouTube station, and nobody even watches the shit he puts out. I mean, it's absolutely annoying to watch him try to. He's pretending to install a heat pump. It's so comical. Please watch it.
Foreign jobs. Here's what could have happened. We could have ensured, and Liberals could have ensured, we mine the material for batteries in Canadian mines with Canadian workers. We're not. We could have ensured that the parts for the cars were made by Canadian workers and Canadian factories. We're not. These could have been 100% Canadian jobs. They're not. Instead, Canadians are paying $1,000 a household, so Canadian contractors can lose $300 million and get ripped off. Why won't they release the contract? Is it because it should have been ripped up?
You're very active today, Karina. Yeah.
The Honourable
It's the House of Corruption.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's just review what Lana Payne has said, the national president of Unifor, Canada's largest private sector union. And
I watched Autumn Kristen. Yes, I watched the drunk and the stoner selling
because the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement negotiated and signed by guess who?
Yeah, he was on there with Seamus O'Regan. Yes, the two of them were trying to sell heat pumps. And Seamus didn't look too convinced, though.
Talking out of both sides of their mouth, and it's embarrassing. That's the largest private sector union in the country. While the Conservatives put their ignorance and recklessness on full display to Canadians, we'll stay focused on building a powerhouse auto industry.
Yeah. No, it's a great video if you have a sense of black humor. But it is absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amateurish government is
memorable.
giving $7 billion of taxpayer money to fund foreign workers in the Montérégie region. Once again, this Prime Minister has failed to protect our Quebec workers. He didn't make sure that the agreement
this guy
had
has
minimum
failed to protect
standards
anybody.
in order to force foreign businesses to hire Quebecers. This government is just not worth the cost. What is the Liberal government hiding in the contrast? And if there's nothing to hide, why not just make them public?
They have so much
The
to
Honourable
hide.
Minister. Mr. Speaker, once
Oh,
again,
skinhead.
these
What is cue ball up
conservatives
to
who
now?
are against the new economy,
The new
that would use
economy.
the talents of all Quebecers
Does that
and
mean
Canadians
the broke economy?
for the new
That's
economy.
a euphemism for
All of these positions
the
for
economy
Quebecers and
that's
Canadians will be
going
in the Montérégie
downhill
region.
fast. The new economy.
The Conservatives wish that we hadn't signed this agreement because they don't know what they want to do for the economy. We will be here for Quebecers and Canadians. We will be there.
No,
in
you will not be
Montérégie.
here
We will
much
be there
longer,
throughout Canada.
cue ball. It's over,
The
cue
honourable
ball.
member from Northwest Territories.
Time to make your exit very, very shortly.
Indigenous tourism was amongst the hardest hit sectors of the travel industry during the pandemic, but it was becoming one of the fastest growing segments of the tourism industry before the pandemic, and that opportunity still exists.
And another good word for the Liberal hack.
An element of reconciliation, a major opportunity for First Nations, Métis,
Can the
and
Liberal
Inuit
hack
communities.
tell us
It was
what they're
amongst the
doing
key
for us?
priorities of the new federal tourism growth strategy announced this summer. Can the Minister of Tourism tell us what our government is doing to support Indigenous tourism?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his important question. Our government wants to position the Indigenous tourism industry for long-term sustainable growth. I recently announced the Indigenous Tourism Fund that will support thousands of projects within macro and small businesses across the country and in his riding of Northern Territories.
In his riding too. Isn't
Indigenous
that
Tourism
nice?
and Industry Association of Canada,
Okay, I can see all starting to get tired. You're giving up on question, Perry.
Indigenous tourism.
Don't give up yet. I got a few things to say at the end. It's almost over.
And more than that,
hang around for the end.
Self-determination, inequality,
by the way, like this broadcast if you haven't done so already. Share it.
The honourable member from Windsor West.
I'll tell you what we're up to here.
Once again, the ultra-rich owner of the Ambassador Bridge is trying to end the ban of hazardous materials on the bridge between Detroit and Windsor. Last year's bridge blockade proved we cannot put the country's most important trade link at risk so a billionaire can profit while endangering businesses, residents, and the environment,
great today,
including
folks.
Great Lakes drinking water.
I do try to read them as they come up here.
Safely crossing the Blue Water Bridge now, and in 18 months at the new Gordie Howe Bridge. Will this government not cave to the billionaires' greed to keep people safe and to keep the ban
It's snowing and I'm in Canada. Well, it was snowing here a minute ago too. I'm just
the honourable
outside of
Minister
Ottawa.
for Housing, Infrastructure, and
We're supposed to get a
Communities.
huge snowstorm.
Mr. Speaker, it's essential that we continue to make the investments and work with partners to keep our trade corridors open,
Oh,
including
this guy.
making
eh?
necessary
This is the guy who
investments
thinks
to improve
all the
our
new
country's national infrastructure that
illegal
helps drive our
immigrants should
local
get a free
economy.
house.
With respect to the honourable member's very specific local concerns about
Yeah.
the bridge he's raising this question, I'd be
So
happy
to
to
hell
speak
with
with him after
veterans
question
and everybody
period and
else,
set up a time
who's
to
been here
discuss
for
the
most of
details
their life
in
and all
person
they
as our
got.
schedules
To hell with
allow.
them.
Thank you.
They can starve, freeze,
The
look
honourable
for an
member
apartment
from
someplace.
Edmonton, Griesbach.
But oh yeah.
Mr. Speaker, people
You
living
just
with
crossed the border
disability
yesterday?
are
Well,
children,
got a free house for you.
parents,
These
grandparents,
liberals are
community
just so
members, our
morally
neighbors, our
corrupt and
fellow
bankrupt.
Canadians, and they deserve to live in dignity. The few in Alberta who get some provincial support know it's not enough and feel they are being trapped in continual poverty.
Well, you know,
Your
we're all sort of
Democrats and
trapped by this
disability
Trudeau
advocates
government.
fought to secure a national Canada disability
Well, Bev,
benefit,
thank you
but the
for
Liberals
listening today.
are delaying.
And
Edmontonians
please,
living with a disability don't have time to
please
wait.
watch my
When will the
broadcast. I'm
government
doing them
implement
every
a
day
fully
now.
funded Canada
I remember when I
disability
started
benefit?
this thing, I was doing it a week with Western Canada.
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
And
Mr. Speaker,
I started doing them independently, and I was doing one a
our
week.
House together
And
passed an important disability
we're
benefit.
thinking, you know,
C-22.
that might be
We
enough.
are
No,
committed
it's
to making
it's
sure
not.
that this
It
benefit
becomes
is
like a
realized,
first priority
that this
after a
will
while.
get dollars
as well as
into
the writing. I write
the
for the
pockets
Post
of
Millennial. I
those
write
who
for
need it.
Human Events.
For Canadians
I write
who
for the
are
Epic
with
Times, and I
disability,
write
who
for my
are
own
working age,
Substack.
this will help
But
alleviate poverty and help Canadians
this
who are
station has
looking
become
towards this benefit. We will do so
almost my first
properly
priority.
and without
And
delay.
I think it's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think new media is the future,
And so
and
brings this to
independent
an end
media
of another
is the
question
future.
period.
So,
2 points of order. I recognize here on the floor the
I'm just
honourable
going
member
to see if there's
from
anything worse.
Edmonton Sherwood Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sherwood Park.
No. Anyway, thank you so much for. I'm going to take these off. Thank you so much for watching today. If you're a viewer of Redacted, please watch the show today. I will be on to talk about Ukraine and this big controversy about the free trade agreement with Ukraine that the Conservatives did not support for good reason. For very good reason, because Trudeau wanted to increase Ukraine's carbon tax. But even if that wasn't the reason, and I hope it really wasn't the reason, I hope the reason Polyev developed some spine on this was because the grassroots supporters who are going to vote Conservative want Polyev and the leadership of the Conservative Party to say, enough! No more money to Ukraine. They are just. Zelensky is a clown and a criminal and a thief. He's looting the money we have sent them, and NATO countries have sent them. The United States have sent them. We're talking tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. And no, it hasn't all gone to armaments. And if it did, all those armaments are gone, blown up, destroyed on the battlefield by the Russians. But all this so-called humanitarian aid, this hundreds of millions of dollars in humanitarian aid, it's all gone to prop up a corrupt, dictatorial, tyrannical government. And Zelensky is, as I was corrected, $75 million he just spent on 2 yachts. And he's getting ready to leave the country. He's getting ready to bolt the country as soon as Ukraine goes down to defeat. But I don't think he's going to be safe anywhere because he's going to be a wanted man by a lot of Ukrainian oligarchs who think he should have ended this war a lot sooner. And there's probably up to 500,000 dead Ukrainians as a result of this war. And people like Justin Trudeau want to keep killing them. Keep the war going, keep sending money, keep giving all of our weapons away, keep the war going because Ukraine is standing for freedom. No, of course it's not. Ukraine's not even a democracy. There's no principle of freedom at stake here. This is a big farce. So anyway, I'm talking about that on Redacted today with Clayton Morris. Please watch my episodes of Stand on Guard. I really enjoy doing it. And appreciate your comments so much. And I will be speaking tomorrow night. I encourage you to have a look into. Christine Anderson is speaking tomorrow night here in Ottawa, along with some other folks, including me. And I am looking forward to meeting Christine Anderson. And I am still furious that Polyev berated some of his MPs for meeting with her and called her terrible things that have no relevance to who she is. I have a lot of respect for Christine Anderson, and I'm sure most of my viewers do. And if Polyev's got to develop a little more spine and guts to stop listening to those pseudo-conservatives in his communications department, and I know who you are. Yeah, you've always been there, and you're back again, and you want to just you brought down Harper in the last election with your idiocy and stupidity. And you'll try the same thing with Polyev. But anyway, I digress. Thanks for watching today. It's a pleasure to do this broadcast. I'm at the Freedom Trial Convoy tomorrow, back with Tamara and Chris. But I will be back doing this on Thursday if all goes well. I'm not sure if I'm at the trial or not. But thanks for your support. And I'll say goodbye for now. God bless you all.